Thanks for joining us.
No worries.
What I was hoping to do was speak with you in relation to the change that seems to have occurred in businesses everywhere. And the big change that I'm speaking about in relation to transport and logistics is all to do with data.
Yep.
You know, so we've got GPS, and I laugh at times because I know that you got your players with their little pocket and the GPS thing sits in there, and I go, well, that's you're tracking your assets and we're tracking our assets, for example. And I can't help but, you know, when I'm watching the game and I'm watching you on the sidelines, you're basically looking at your leader computer.
Yep.
So we'll give leader a plug as well.
Yep.
You're looking at your leader computer constantly. So firstly, what's data done for your business? What's data doing for you as a coach? I mean, what do you look at? It's less about what you look at, but what are you trying to drive out of it? What's it driving for you?
Oh, well, ultimately it helps us drive probably important parts of our strategy. And that's obviously a crucial part to be able to measure against, I guess, the competition about where we sit within that. It helps us target where our improvement areas need to be over the course of a game. But also what's important is that as an extension to game day, what we are trying to always do is create the environment for the players to be able to go out there and do what they do. So we take a lot of pride in that we create a very much a game-like environment, that when our players step into a training environment, that we can basically measure most of those components about what they can expect game day. So it gives them the best possible chance to be able to go out there and execute. So that's where we probably start. GPS is one component of it. We also take these game-like representative values. That is all about measuring every kick they kick, every handball they handball, and the time they have for the disposal, and is it pressured or unpressured. And so when we take a total picture of the training environment, we can measure the GPS plus the game-like representative values, and we can make a better judgment on whether we felt like we provided the right environment for the players to be able to go out there and execute. Of course, the end result is that you want them to go out there on game day and be able to thrive in those moments. So that is one area that's changed significantly for us from when I played to now. It's now not just about counting the minutes of the drill, and it's about, you know, calculating the periodisation of the loads over the course of, you know, a season. How is that represented to a game? What environment do we need to put around the players so we can rehearse some of those scenarios or rehearse that game-like environment? And so our players have a better ability to be able to go out and execute, and they get to execute it under game-like pressure.
Okay.
And so I guess the flow and effect of that is obviously game day, which is, you know, as you've seen, there's computers and data, and there's a fair bit going on. So what do you pay attention to, the vision or the data, and or the numbers, I guess, if you want to call data numbers? So we're always sort of making, you know, judgments on that. Is it the data we need to listen to, or is it the vision we need to see and make judgments on?
Yeah, that's a great response, and I hope you don't mind me saying this because I don't want to make you blush, but I was never a Brisbane Lions supporter, but I was a great admirer of you as a player.
Yeah.
And you know, the things that stood out to me as a layperson watching you play is that you had tremendous courage, you had great instinct, and you had a real feel for the game. And I guess the question I've got for you, because once again, as a business leader, I guess you get a sense of things, right? And your data is saying one thing, and you've got your gut instinct and your feeling, and even more so in your environment, I suggest that in ours, what do you run with? Do you run with the gut feeling and the instinct, or do you run with, well, this is the data, my coaches are telling me, and everything else?
Yeah, I think in any decision you're making, I think it's important to have all those plug-in points. You know, is it the data? Is it the behaviour? Is it the vision? And it all sort of forms the view. And I guess then it's for the leader to make the decision on, I get that, but the feel is I need to go this way. And that's where probably gut instinct and experience takes over. Yeah. That's the read of the game. That's the, you know, I know the numbers are saying that, you know, we're low on contested ball, but I feel like we need to own the footy for a little while, you know, to sort of take the pressure away. So you're always still making judgment calls on that. And then there are times when sometimes the data is just so compelling, it's just make sure that you don't, you know, use your own ego against it as well. It's so compelling, you need to listen to it, even if you have an alternative probably view. So I think that's where sort of experience does kick in a little bit. But yeah, we don't use data as the sole decision maker. It is one very, very important plug-in point. But we also have a lot of inputs in, from our coaches and from others. So I tend to think it's more of a collaborative approach to how we end up with the end decision. And obviously, clearly, how we use our data and what we pay attention to is obviously critically important to that.
Does it ever feel lonely out there?
On the ground? It can. It can. I think as a leader, it definitely can.
And that's what I was referring to, really, because you get to a point where I guess you do feel slightly isolated at times, don't you?
Yeah, you can, because you've got to make decisions that are not necessarily, popular. And, we talk about the cost of leadership. We don't talk about that probably enough. There is a cost to leadership.
Yeah.
When I played, being the captain of the side didn't necessarily make me, the most loved teammate, but I hope it made me the most respected. And and so you're always making judgments based on what you think is best for the team. And I feel like, intent plays a really big role in leadership, because if my intent is for the team and it's not for myself, I have no motive, no agenda other than I'm trying to make the team better. You can make decisions a lot clearer, and sometimes they're just not popular. Yeah. And look, I think as leaders, we're challenged with that every single day, to be fair. I'm challenged with it almost weekly, because I'm telling people who are in the team and who are out of the team, and I've got to tell those people every week who's in the team and out of the team, and I'm popular to some and I'm unpopular others, so it's, but that's sort of part of the job, and you sort of accept that that's part of your job. And despite all that, I think you can still come across as empathetic, and you can still deliver it the right way. But it's still also with the this is best for the team in front of mind.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point. I use the adage at work, Vossy, of saying to people, you may not like what I'm about to say, or people now say it back to me, they go, I know, it comes from a place of love, right? Because it always it comes from a place of love, And I guess that's really what you're touching on too. It's never personal.
Yeah.
When you're having the hard conversations and telling a player he's not going to be in the team, do you utilise data to justify some of that?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Whatever's available, and we have some obviously objective opinion about how they played, and they have an objective opinion as well. But sometimes to bridge the gap between the way you see it and the way they see it, you use every means possible to be able to try and communicate what that gap looks like. And I guess I try where possible, though, is I don't like to use comparisons. I tend to try and stay away from comparisons. I try to always sort of pitch it at where we see them and our expectations of them, and where they contribute to the team, and not to compare that to the person they're playing beside or the person they're competing a spot for. It's about their best version of themselves, and are they bringing that to the table, and where can they improve? And so data is actually a really important part in that. Again, it's crucial sort of not to overuse it. It has its place, because I think the part of using data is how do you make the complex into simple? And as footy players, we're really simple beasts. So going complex makes it really hard to understand. But I feel like our job as leaders is to get the really complex, and when you're sort of pulling all that data apart, and then when you go speak to the people, it's about just the simple answer, the simplicity in what you're trying to execute, the simplicity of what you're actually trying to get people to understand. They don't need to understand the whole lot. That's why you're the leader. You're the one that's supposed to understand all that and decipher it, and then put it into a really understandable form.
Yeah, I think it was Steve Jobs who once said the hardest thing in business is to keep things simple.
Yeah.
And hence why Apple has been such a success. It's like everybody can press a button, can't they? Rather than do everything they have to do in the background.
And also we've had a very big thing, and because we're a bit time poor, we feel time poor at times, is that, we come up with a lot of great concepts about what we want to measure. But if you don't use it, what's the point?
Yeah.
And so trying to break it into... there are research and some things you need to do in the background that you just need to keep monitoring, and just keep the trends, and got to keep that in the background. And there might be some projects off to the side that you're just sort of trying to discover a few things, and you want to go in places, you're not sure where it'll take you, so you've got to sort of stay curious with that. And And that's why it's a project, right?
Yeah.
But then there's some others that it's just like, well, are we using this? And if we're not using it, then why have we got it? And why are we spending all our resources, and why are we spending our time over there, and I'm using 3 people to do that job and we don't even pay attention to it?
Yeah.
So you just got to be careful how we use it as well.
Yeah, and I can completely relate to that because...
well, if you're in logistics, I'm sure you
I can completely... because, I mean... the commercial manager at work, for example, is hell-bent on measuring everything.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, I go, there's no point measuring it. Let's measure the meaningful things really well rather than measure 10 things pretty well, So, no, I get that. And I think, because for me, it is about the key things. It's about certain key things, and then and it's about the feeling that you get for it, etc. You spoke earlier on in relation to creating the best possible environment for your people. And once again, I guess at Ontime, we try and create the best possible environment for people. We do it through having performance reviews. We do it through having ongoing conversations. And even for our contractors, I mean, data to me is great with clients because it allows us to have a non-emotive conversation. I mean, a client, without boring you, a client will go, I think this driver's really slow. Oh, well, why is that? Oh, well, he just walks really slow around the warehouse, right? But does he get back on time? Yeah. Does he do all his deliveries right? Yeah. Well, let's look at his data. Well, he's the best one. He does the most deliveries. He does it in the quickest possible time, et cetera, et cetera. But because he walks slow, you feel that he's slow, So it's... And it can be utilised both ways. I think this driver's not doing the right thing. We can check the data and we go, you're right, he's not doing the right thing.
Yep.
So I'd imagine that you would utilise it in exactly the same way. Sometimes I'm sure as coaches, you're having a conversation about a player and you might go, well, let's look at the data and go, hang on, well, the data doesn't indicate that he was doing the wrong thing or whatever.
There's a balance in that I think within teams and team dynamics is we actually appreciate in everything that we do that we just have differences. We're just different to each other.
Yeah.
We bring strengths, different strengths. Now the sum, we talk a lot about that because it's like the sum of those strengths though will make that person better because it complements, you complement his strengths. And when you're in a system like us, there's distinguishing differences in capacity and there's distinguishing differences in roles we ask them to play. There's distinguishing difference in height and so we have to learn to live that there are some things that people don't necessarily see eye to eye on, right?
Yeah.
But how efficient are they? Do they get their job done? Are they trustworthy in what they do? And we might not necessarily agree with the way that it gets done, but that's their strength and that's how they make them better. As long as they sort of understand that there's still values of the organisation that we need to live in, there's still behaviours we need to be able to follow. And as long as we stay really true and congruent with those, then we can sort of deal with the idiosyncrasies of how they go about it, and maybe the speed that we would like them to do it at versus the speed that they do it at. But if they're efficient and they're effective and they're a good team member, then we should pay less attention to that and maybe have the better conversation, which is how are you efficient, how are you effective, and you just highlighted a couple of things that you deem them to be, is that's the efficiency, that's how they're effective. And maybe we need to sort of deal with some of those idiosyncrasies.
You spoke about data during training and trying to create an environment that replicates game day to the best of your possible ability. Do you create expectations of the players? So is there, for example, they're meant to create so many hardball gets or so much of this or so much of that? I mean, do players go out with those sort of numbers going, I've got to achieve that? Or
no, because we tend to, on reflection in games, we get to probably match them up against what we require, but we very much stay away from outcome-focused particular goals. Like I need 6 tackles, I've got to have 30 disposals. So we really reward the process and how they replicate process over time. And we find that the outcomes take you away from staying present to what you need to be able to do and what's right in front of you. And if there's anything affects players' performance more, it's outcomes. And so because players naturally go there because they've been brought up that way, like I'm sitting at half time and I'm start counting on my fingers and I'm like, hang on, I have 10, 11, and now I've kicked 5 goals and 6 goals. I can kick 12 here. The moment you have that thought, generally it goes bad. it goes really, really bad. Whereas if you stick to your process and your behaviours and you actually just really believe on that and you double down on what that looks like and you create the habits, you will get there in time.
Yeah.
And it might not be this game, but it will be the next game. You will have a bad day, but you won't have a bad month.
Yeah.
And that's what we continually talk about here, because we have a win-loss at every single week and we are measured by that. What we also should be measured is what we do Monday to Saturday and what happens in between, not just the 2 hours.
Yeah. Yeah, that's. I think that's a great philosophy. And as a quality assured company, we're all about process.
Yep.
We're about process and system. Follow the process and system, because inevitably, as soon as somebody doesn't do that in our business, there's an error.
Yep.
That normally costs us money. In your business, I'd suggest there's an error that normally costs you goals.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is one and the same.
And what fluctuates that is emotion. You know,
Yeah.
like it's sort of like the only reason why that process or that system adjusts is because maybe the process is not going as well as what you'd want it to. But again, it's taken over time, so emotion takes over time because either I made a mistake, so I changed what I'm doing, or I don't follow that process because I don't trust it anymore, or and so that's sometimes where the error does happen, where you just get them to follow through, get your role done, know the game model we want to play on, do the predictable thing at the right time. Because ultimately, we're trying to prepare them for Grand Final Day, 100,000 people, 2 million people watching, and they make the right decision at the right time. And that's effectively what we're training our players for.
Yeah. How much of it is trained and how much of it's instinctive?
Oh, that's a great point. I'd like to think a lot of it's trained.
Yeah.
But it's clearly people or players in our, well, they have an instinct for it as well. It's probably what they rise to the top.
Yeah, they stand out.
They stand
you
out.
can see them.
Yeah. If they've got the less talent, they follow process and you can generally maximise their talent, which I think that's where coaches, how coaches are deemed as good coaches, is that if they're doing a little bit more than what maybe other people expect, that's, I think, what people describe a good coach.
Yeah.
Whereas if you've got a really talented group and they're not probably meeting those expectations, it's amazing how you give
the
them
heat's on the coach.
different. Yeah, exactly right. So, and we know that fluctuates from time to time. So, but high performance lives on a knife's edge. It's I always talk about, we could fall that way on the knife, or we could fall that way on the knife. It's just constantly always in balance, and we have to respect that. We're not fall too far one way and we can't fall too far the other. We've just got to make sure we stick on that line where we possibly can and keep doing the right things. And over time, you'll get there.
Yeah. So at the beginning of every financial year, we create a budget, and that becomes our pass mark.
Yep.
How do you create a pass mark for yourself, your team, your players?
That's a good question. I think you're always trying to measure the progression in your team and in your players. I've had multiple conversations with the players this year about how I felt like they've improved as players. And if our environment is helping our people improve and get better, and there's some subjective data in that clearly, and there's some obviously real data in that which tends to fall out whether you're winning or losing, but it's got to be more than that. And so you get to sort of build the belief off the back of that. But then, ultimately I'm still, to my board and to the Carlton Football Club and to our supporters, I'm still measured by ultimately winning and losing, and I still know that there's an end goal of playing finals and winning finals and playing in grand finals, and that's sort of where performance is pretty clear cut when it comes to that. If you're not getting that sort of result, you tend to lose your job. So it's pretty clear cut, even if you're doing a lot of other right things. I guess last year was probably a little bit of case in point where the actual win-loss was not going that well. But every other metric we were taking was saying, and when I say metric, the surveys we talk, our players, their engagement levels, how happy they were and what they felt like there was a really great environment, and all of that information coming back to us, but we need to improve it, but it's in a good place. So it gave us great confidence to just keep doubling down on it, keep doubling down. This thing will turn. Now, ultimately it turned. But without that data, without being able to listen to the people, we probably could have taken a different path.
Yeah.
So it was actually a really important point that even the outcome not going great, the process was going really well. Environment was really healthy. So it gave us great confidence as leaders. It's like, oh, hang in there.
Yeah, good on you.
Just keep hanging in there, and hopefully this thing changes.
It's interesting you speak about that time, because from an outsider looking in, people probably would have thought that the process was okay, but the environment wasn't great, because
That's generally what
and
people,
that was the chat, wasn't
generally
it?
what people say.
It was like, oh, well, they're not playing for the coach, or they're not this, or they're not buying into this process or the system, and yet, internally, as you said, all the measurements show that they were actually really strong.
Yeah, and that's, I think, maybe that's what gives you a little bit of experience. Having been a head coach before and not necessarily, I obviously got sacked from that particular job, and I learned a lot of things out of that, what to pay attention to and what not to, and so out of that experience, despite the outside, heat coming, it was just eyes in. And it's just like, no, let's listen to the things that we need to listen to. A small thing that I did through that particular time was, social media, people have an opinion, media shows. I really limited that consumption. And the reason why I limited that consumption was because as a leader, I wanted to make decisions based on what I saw, not what I was hearing.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to put emotion to it. I didn't want to have a thought on a player because someone in a footy show said that I should think about this as a player. It's like, well, he seems to be doing the right things to me.
Yeah.
He's doing all the things I expect a player to do. He just has to see through time, and he'll get there.
Yeah.
And so that helped give clarity to me about the decisions that I needed. And so I didn't pay attention to the information I had around me. I paid the information that was in front of me, which was
fantastic.
The training data, the player surveys, the way we were playing. It's just this W and L was not ticking over.
Everyone's got a feeling, you have no Vossi. I mean, but ultimately it's about the data. It's about the raw material that's gonna determine what you do. Everything I hear about you is that you're a great leader. So could you tell me why people have the perception that you're a great leader, and what you think makes you unique?
I've never been, I don't know how many times I've been asked that before, so it's very hard to answer that question, because there's an element of humility to it as well, other than...
No, let loose, mate.
Yeah, no, look, I think I get told that certainly I feel like one of my greatest strengths is that I'm present to the people in front of me. Just being able to stay present and listen to the person in front of me, stop and have a conversation. I've got nowhere more important to be. Just a simple skill set like that. I have a mantra, which is always have the courage to compete. And courage to me as a player was very simple. It was, always go get the ball and put your head over it. Courage as a leader is very different, because sometimes you've got to make the unpopular decision, and you just got to keep making the right decisions. And you've got to do it with all the noise around you. And so sometimes you just need those courageous moments to make those decisions. So I'm not afraid to put my neck out and go, this is where we need to go. And I'm not afraid to stand my ground on the philosophies that I believe in, that I think will support us. And so having courage to be able to know what to change and what to stay the same is critical. And the second thing with compete is, for me, is that competition is what I love. It's what I'm defined by. I struggled with it for a little while in terms of what does that competition mean for me as a coach? As a player, it was very simple. I go to compete and I'm going to win the next contest. Competition for me as a leader is about finding the best version of myself and being better every single day. And so I've become more of a life learner, and I've stayed curious, and I'm not sort of necessarily fixed mindset. I like to improve, hear people's views, collaborate, form opinions, and then make the decisions. And so trying to find the best version of myself is very important to me. So I think that mantra is hold me in good stead, and I hope that sort of comes out in some of my leadership style.
I'm sure it does.
No, appreciate it.
Does any of that make you unique?
No, I don't think it necessarily makes me unique. But what I do think is sort of makes you a bit unique is that that's where you bring something that's a bit different to the table. And I don't think what makes me unique is I don't think enough leaders understand their own self well enough, and they don't understand their philosophies well enough. And you've got to take a deep dive into that, because when you don't need it for when things are going well, you need it when things go bad.
Yep.
Because when things go bad and people have got their own opinions, and you got 9 people who've got a different way of doing things, and you've got 1,500 metres that got a different way of doing things, you have to be the man that stands your ground. And
Absolutely.
so if you're not sure of yourself, what will happen is that you'll probably end up changing, faltering, adjusting, and becoming a hybrid version of what you want to be.
Yep.
And I think you've got to be at some stage really comfortable in your own skin to go, not in an arrogant way, in a humble way, to go, look, I'm comfortable with myself. I've got the experience, I understand my philosophy, I understand it, it's really rich, it's really deep, and I believe that this is the right thing to do.
Yeah.
And then if it doesn't work out, well, at least you can walk away and sort of say, well, that's my way.
Done it your way, have
Did
you?
it my way.
Have you read a book called Relentless?
I have read a book called Relentless, very good book.
And that's what it speaks about, doesn't it? I mean,
Yeah.
we've all got the dark side, and at the end of the day, people that are at the top of their field, they just believe, and regardless of the noise outside, they believe, don't they?
Yeah,
You know?
absolutely. And that's why, if you're talking about uniqueness, I don't think that necessarily makes me unique.
No.
But what I do think is that's what the very best leaders do. And I'm the unfinished product, but I'm always sort of working towards that.
Good on you. That's wonderful.
Norris,
Thank you so much for your time.
thanks for your time.